one of the rules in the mafia is that if you're a made guy, and that's somebody that's been officially inducted into a family, if I get into a confrontation with him, I can't lay my hands on him. That's a death sentence. If he's not a made guy, if he wasn't inducted into the family, then he's fair game. So one guy was a made guy, one guy wasn't. On the way out of the room, I just laid out the guy that wasn't a made guy because that's all they understand. Because if somebody calls you out, you have to maintain your credibility, but you have to maintain your respect. You don't hang around with guys 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not find something decent about them, even though they're stone cold killers. I mean, everybody I hung around with was a stone cold killer. Everybody has a personality.
Yeah.
And it's no different with these guys. They like their kids. They love their kids. If they had grandkids, they love their grandkids. But then again, an hour later, they're whacking somebody that they've known for 20 years.
Well, it's the land of the free and home of the brave. Stairs in the house of the community. But leave them alone and what they're gonna say. With the clean back, like and Marcus here to stay.
My next guest needs no introduction, but for those of you who live under a rock, I will be brief. He is the undercover GOAT. He wrote the book Donnie Brasco about his most popular undercover operation. And there is a movie out by the same name. You should read the book, watch the movie. It stars Al Pacino and Johnny Depp. He spent nearly 6 years deep undercover away from his family, infiltrating the New York mob. It culminated in over 100 convictions. The man's in witness protection now, and we dig deep into what makes the man who became the hero. Without further ado, please help me in welcoming my new friend, Mr. Joe Pistone. First of all, who was Joe Pistone before the FBI? I mean, in terms of childhood and stuff like that, I know you grew up and you can talk about your neighborhood and everything, but what kind of person were you as a kid? And, how malleable were you to your parents and what they taught you?
Well, I think it goes back to how you grow up. I grew up in an Italian family, both mother and father Italian, very religious, Catholic, and what in my youth, the neighborhoods were very tight knit. So everybody knew everybody. Everybody took care of each other. So you had that sense of taking care of your neighbor or somebody that you were close to. I wasn't a troublesome kid. I mean, I got into my share of fights and stuff, but not never robbed anything, never stole anything.
Kid stuff.
Just the kid stuff growing up in a rough neighborhood, a rough Italian neighborhood. That's it. I knew wise guys, from the neighborhood. And growing up Italian back then, you didn't talk unless you were asked a question around a kitchen table. That's the way it was. You had conversations, but you respected your elders. And that's basically the way it was. That's the way I grew up. I was very much not an outward going kid. In other words, I was a pretty good athlete.
Okay.
And I never bragged about it. I mean, I was a good athlete and I played basketball. I was a pretty good basketball player. And I made no big deal of it. I kept to myself a lot. I mean, I had a lot of good friends, had a lot of friends, but I never pushed myself on anybody. And that's the way I grew up. I mean, I wasn't outgoing outward about my basketball abilities or my football abilities.
Did you consider yourself an introvert as a kid?
In some ways, yeah. Again, because I wasn't the one in the crowd that was always talking. I was more a listener than a talker. My ideal was, if I don't have anything to say, why should I say it? I mean, and I think that's why I was successful in all my undercover operations.
Yeah.
because I didn't feel like I I had to talk or have conversation just to keep it going. And that's the way I grew up like that. If I was with a bunch of guys and uh, everybody was saying, I just sit back and listen. If I had something I thought was important to say, I'd say it. I didn't talk just to talk. And that's the way I am today, actually. And that's why a
Yeah.
lot of people, a lot of people think that I'm standoffish, but I don't. I never saw the need to make conversation if it didn't have to be,
Yeah.
if there didn't need to be one. I mean, I drove from Tampa to Miami, which is probably a 3-hour ride with a wise guy, and I didn't think I said one word to him.
And
I
he was
mean,
fine with that. And he was fine with that too, I
he
guess,
was
huh?
fine with that too. I mean, there was no need to make conversation because I knew everything that was happening. I knew why we were going to Miami, and when we got to Miami, then then the conversation will begin. But
Right.
like I said, I was in the car for like 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and not a word.
And that maybe your parents should have written a parenting book, because I mean, it would be a miraculous thing to teach kids these days too, just to be more aware and listening than active
Well,
listener instead of an active talker, right?
that's exactly right. And I mean, you were in the business. The problem with getting back to undercover is that they always think they have to be talking. They're not good listeners.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I found that out. Uh, in, in my undercover instructions. They always want to be talking, but they don't. They don't listen. They never.
Yeah.
They never let the bad guy finish a sentence. But
Yeah.
I was basically a listener forever.
Yeah. And so when you started coming up and then getting into, I mean, you were a teacher at first. Did you teach very long, by the way? Was that something you
No,
aspired to do long term, or?
no. I always wanted to go into law enforcement.
Okay.
That was my goal. I taught 1 year, and then I went into naval intelligence. I worked in naval intelligence for several years, and then I applied to the FBI. I actually applied to the FBI and DEA, but back then it wasn't DEA. It was I think it was the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs or something.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was in naval intelligence, I did a lot of work with the DEA and the FBI. So I was recruited by both, but uh, I got called to the FBI first for to take their test, and I was fortunate enough to pass it.
When you started thinking about undercover work, was that something that was commonplace? Because I know in today's world, it's really atypical for anyone to go deep undercover. Certainly deep undercover is what I'm talking about. Undercover gigs that are, buy bus and stuff like that are all the time. What was it like back then? Was it a groundbreaking experience to go through something like that?
Well, back in the day when I first started, look, I went into the FBI in 1969. So all the undercover, there were probably throughout the whole country, maybe 25, 30 guys that did undercover. But it was all, like a buy bust,
Right.
you bought art, you bought stolen commodities, stuff like that. You might have had one or two meets with the bad guy. And then on the third, fourth meet, uh, they get busted. We didn't start doing long term, and deep cover. There's there's not many deep cover operations.
Right.
There never has been many. There's been some. We've had agents, that went deep cover, but the deep cover operations are very few. One of the first ones was actually a sting operation out of Washington D.C., where the FBI and the Metropolitan Police opened up a pawn shop, so to speak, and they got the word out that they were buying stolen property. So
Hmm.
that went on for a long time, and they had a couple FBI agents and a couple Washington D.C. Coppers that were working the pawn shop. Uh, but these guys went home every night. So as far as deep cover, for your audience, there's a difference between undercover and there's a difference between deep cover. Undercover, like we just discussed, you 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 go back to your office. You go home every night. Now, when you go deep cover, you walk out of that office. You walk out of your office, and You leave your gun behind. You leave your credentials behind. You leave your badge behind, and you never go back to that office as long as you're working the operation. And you also move out of your residence, and you get an undercover residence. You don't go back to your home base. Maybe once every few months, and that's deep cover. Once you're out there on your own, and that's a lot of people. A lot of people can't do it, and a lot of people won't do it. I don't blame anybody for not doing it because you leave your life behind you. If you have a family, you're basically leaving your family behind you, and it takes a certain mental toughness to do the deep cover because you're out there. Yourself. Uh, Not many officers, and when I say officers, I'm talking about feds too.
Mm-hmm.
They like to operate without their gun and badge. And when you're in deep undercover, you're operating with your fake ID. That's it. That's all you're operating with.
Right.
And that takes a different mindset. That takes a different mental toughness to be able to do that. And I think, and I always say, you can be a good undercover, deep undercover. You have had to be a great street cop or street agent. But just because you're a great street agent or great street cop doesn't mean you're going to be a good undercover agent. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it makes sense to me because and the audience may not know. Maybe we get more into the weeds here because if you're a great street cop, you also have mannerisms like a great street cop, and that you're going to have to undo that at some point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But you also have developed a street sense to where you kind of you've honed your intuitive sense, right?
Yeah, and you got to have good street smarts to be a good cop or a good undercover. So, like I say, you could be a good undercover, but you might not be so good at deep undercover because, you have that in the back of your mind, I don't have my gun with me. I don't have my badge with me. You might be good at, one or two meets or 1 or 2 week operations, but you still have that connection to your
home base,
to your home base, to your family, to your organization. So there's a big difference between that, and that's why you don't have a lot of deep undercover operations. You may have a lot of long term where the organization starts a business and the undercovers are working in the business, but then they go home at night to their families and they don't really socialize with the bad guys.
Right. And they have cover the whole time too. They're working with other people.
They got cover the whole time. But in a lot of deep undercover situations, you don't have cover because nobody's going to, once you start that's a 7-day-a-week job, 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bad guys in the beginning, it's like, we see you Monday to Friday. Where the hell are you Saturday and Sunday?
Yeah.
Right. So now you got a 7-day-a-week job. And I don't blame a lot of guys that they don't want to give up their weekends. And, especially today's generation,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and it's not, and I could be off here. Tell me if you've learned any different. It's not really permissible in very many places either, just because of the liability and the risk and everything that comes with it, and all the stories about the cowboys that go off and start doing all kinds of crazy stuff because they're not actually disciplined undercovers or know what they're doing. They just go out and start acting a fool to try to fit in. There's a lack of training in a lot of different places. So I know it's tough in municipal departments and sheriff departments and stuff like that. I know it's difficult to actually get permission to even try to do stuff like that. And is it like that in the feds these days as well? Was it difficult to convince somebody to let you go do something so long term, even though you kind of didn't know it was going to be as long as it ended up being?
I think if you have a good case going, the only problem is now there's so many different rules. Like the undercover has to check in every day, with your contact agent. They're not gonna. They want surveillance on you 24/7, and like in my case, with the mafia in New York, I can't have surveillance 24/7 in those neighborhoods.
Right.
But so that's why I think that the days of deep cover long term are pretty much history.
And so how did you end up finagling permission? Because when you mentioned, like, hey, if you have a good case going, a lot of times you back in the day would get, permission to go move ahead. And in this particular case, if you paint a picture about how you kind of got drawn into it and then started off your first 6 months without really establishing squat, even though I know you actually did establish quite a bit, but in a supervisor's eyes, for instance, you have to keep reporting in. And after 5 and 6 months, that you had to feel like, man, they're going to pull the plug on this some gun anytime. How did you manage to keep them allowing you to keep diving into this, spending money, time, resources, all this stuff on that case? And how did you end up kind of growing into that case?
Well, my case, I was working out in New York, and back in the day, New York, obviously the biggest office in the bureau. Most of the bosses and the supervisors that were in New York were old time street guys, and the saying was there's Washington D.C. and then there's New York. So New York kind of did what New York wanted to do, because a lot of the supervisors in D.C. were old time New Yorkers. So you had that connection, and I was lucky enough that I had a supervisor that was an old time New Yorker, grew up in New York, had worked some undercover against the mob in his day when so he knew you don't just walk into a place and say, hey, I'm Donnie Brasco and I'm gonna, I'm a jewel thief and I want to start working with you. I mean, you don't do that against the mob.
Right.
So a lot of it has to come to what office you were in, and how they treated the operation and what you were provided. I wasn't, my first 5-6 months, I wasn't really providing any information of illegal activity, but I was providing intelligence information by hitting these different bars and restaurants. Hey, so and so hangs out here. So and so hangs out here. These guys meet every Wednesday at this restaurant. So it was pretty much intelligence until I broke in with a couple guys, and then I was able to start developing the illegal information.
Okay, so you were the intelligence gatherer too. So they were kind of leaning on you. So you were providing it at the very least. Yes, I can confirm XYZ shows up over here. I'm moving over here, and working on garnering some relationships. As you're getting at least a kind of a lay of the land set up for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's where it was in the beginning.
Okay.
Made some headway and broke the ice and start hanging with, got accepted and start hanging with guys that were doing illegal activities.
Right. And how much of your personality did you leverage? And I respect the fact that it could be different in how you teach now versus teaching undercovers versus how you did it. But how much of your actual personality did you leverage? Because when you talked about the FBI doing undercover ops and stuff, if you're working at a local department, you're staying in your own city or you're staying in your own county or whatever, but they're moving you around, so you have to acclimate, I assume. But how much do you think is reasonable to change in terms of your personality, and was it an advantage or disadvantage?
Well, my theory is you never change your personality. No matter what undercover operation I worked in, I never changed my personality. I never changed my character, and I think that's one of the problems with a lot of undercovers, young undercovers. They think they're with bad guys, so you got to act a certain way. Well, I never changed my personality. I was always a laid back guy, and not pushy. Never, didn't talk unless I had to talk, and I maintained that in all my undercover operations. Before the 6 year one, I had come off a year and a couple months operation, and I was the same guy on that. It was a car theft ring that I had infiltrated. But I think that's the key to success, is being yourself. Just being yourself. That's the key to success. Because look, not to be a psychiatrist, but everybody has a personality. And just because you're a bad guy doesn't mean every bad guy has a personality, Some of them have B, C, D, and E. So you just have to be who you are. And that's the way I was, I never got in anybody's face unless you got into mine. And that's the way I was in real life, And I think that was the secret to my success in all my undercover operations, is just being who I was.
Does that make it more? I guess my question that I would have asked earlier that I missed too was, do you think there are certain people that have a knack for this that you can tweak and allow to take and run with this, and that have a natural innate ability? Or do you think it can be taught? Because there's so much nuance in this stuff.
I always tell the students, I can't teach you to be an undercover agent. The only thing I can do is, after, the first few days and running scenarios, if you have it, all we can do is tweak it and give you pointers how to infiltrate and how to stay alive while you infiltrate. I mean, nobody can teach you to be an undercover agent. No, you either have that sense or you don't have that sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've noticed too, and I don't know all of them. There have to be some that I'm keenly unaware of, but you ran into so many situations that would have broken normal folks. Even other good undercovers would have broken under the strain of some of the circumstances that you found yourself within, whether it be the boat with the FBI or having to assault somebody. I mean, maybe we start there. So you had a situation where, I'll let you set the scene, where you had to actually punch somebody in the face. And my question would be, did anything cross your mind at the time that didn't have to do with the case? Did it ever occur to you that I'm about to do something that is against my general orders or whatever, and what is the FBI going to say if they find out about this right away? Obviously, we all know about it now, but I assume it wasn't like something that you made a big deal out of then.
Yeah, well, you know yourself that there's only one person that saves your life in undercover, and that's you. That surveillance team, your SWAT team, HRT, SEAL Team 6, they come in after, right? It's action versus reaction. The action is when they kill you. The reaction is when your team comes in to drag your ass out of there.
Right.
So, in that situation, I had two guys call me out. When I say call me out, not to get into a long, drawn-out story, but I had turned down a couple scores that they had lined up, and they didn't like it. So they wanted to question me, and that was their right. they had a gun on the table, doors locked, and, we're in that room for 4.5, 5 hours. Once it's all over, and you have to know the organization that you've infiltrated. So after it's all over, you can't just go up and say, hey, Tegan, I appreciate the fact that, that you had some concerns, but let bygones be bygones. It doesn't work that way, because in their mind, then, why isn't this guy mad? Why isn't he PO'd about this deal?
Yeah.
So the only thing to stand at this time is a confrontation. So, and again, I always tell everybody, you have to know your enemy. The art of war. Know your enemy. And in the undercover business, to know everything about your enemy. Are there rules, regulations? How do they live their life according to their organization? And one of the rules of the mafia is that if you're a made guy, and that's somebody that's been officially inducted into a family, he can't be hit. In other words, if I get into a confrontation with him, I can't lay my hands on him.
It's the rules of the street.
Rules of the street, because that's a death sentence.
Yeah.
But if he's not a made guy, if he wasn't inducted into the family, then he's fair game. So one guy was a made guy, one guy wasn't. On the way out of the room, I just laid out the guy that wasn't a made guy, because that's all they understand. That's all they understand.
Right.
And I got into confrontation with him. The made guy, fortunately, got a lot of good shots on me, but I couldn't. Only thing I can do was defend myself against him.
Sure.
And that's the way I would have acted in normal life, because if somebody calls you out, you have to maintain your credibility, but you have to maintain your respect. And especially, you've been a street guy. If you lose your respect on the street, you're done. You're done.
Right. So, and that's kind of you're furthering your street cred at that point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, playing the game, and they respect and appreciate that you know the rules, so you're playing within. However, you're not playing within the rules of the FBI. So did that ever cross your mind, or did you have to report it or keep it quiet at the time? How'd that work?
I never reported that, because then then you got to do paperwork, and nobody got hurt. I mean, the guy that I got some good licks in, they didn't have to take him to the hospital. I didn't have to go to the hospital, so why report it?
Yeah. And some of these folks that we're dealing with here, people have, I think, when we talk about having lots of things in common with different types of people, I think most people would agree that criminals are the one sect of people that we have the least amount in common with. But I discovered there's still a ton in common with even the criminal guys. And I've heard you talk about guys like Tony Mira being like, one of the nastiest cats that you ever dealt with and things like that. Is there anything, maybe start with Tony, but any of the other guys too, that you found over a period of time that you could really relate to? Not necessarily in every way. Obviously they're criminals and you were a law enforcement hero. So there's that, but other things in common that you appreciated about those guys?
Yeah. I mean, look, you don't hang around with guys, 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and, and not find something decent about them, even though they're stone cold killers. I mean, everybody I hung around with was a stone cold killer.
Yeah.
My legend was I was an orphan. So when it came holidays, Donnie, where you going? Well, you're coming to my house for dinner. You're not going to spend Christmas Eve alone. You're not going to spend Christmas alone.
Yeah.
These are guys that that may have taken out their cousins, may have taken out somebody that they grew up with. You find it like one guy, Sonny Black. He was my capo. I mean, this guy at one time was one of the two guys running the Bonanno family. And I used to stay at his apartment when I didn't feel like going back uptown or something. Uh, and we just BS about his kids, about anything, or other guys where you couldn't get into any conversation about anything personal because they were, uh, so that's why I go back to the personalities. Everybody has a personality.
Yeah.
And it's no different with these guys. They like their kids. They love their kids. If they had grandkids, they love their grandkids. So they have that quality. But then again, an hour later, they're whacking somebody that they've known for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like Tony Mirror. Tony Mirror's own nephew whacked him. So it's like crazy. And I mean, Tony Mirror was probably the meanest guy I ever met, but he loved his mother. I mean, everybody loves their mother, but he took care, his mother was elderly and he took care of his mother.
Yeah.
But the guy was just plain nasty. I mean, wise guys didn't like him. That's how nasty he was. And for a wise guy not to like you,
Yeah. So was there anything else in common maybe that you and Tony had in common? And specifically Tony? Because I know he's the one that you had, the most disdain for just because of the way he carried himself and everything, right?
He had a way he carried himself, and he tried to have me killed 3 times. He called 3 sit downs where he made charges against me that I stole money from the family. The only thing we had in common is I didn't like him and he didn't like me. That's the only thing we had. That's the only thing we had in common.
We'll take it. Some of those people exist. We all know that too. So
yeah, exactly.
you can find the beauty in small things, and that's a great thing to have in common with that cat. That's funny. So when you mentioned Sonny Black, so if you don't mind, at least giving a brief history, and his demise was truly remarkable. And I wonder, my question as you set this up is, if you would have been able to look back on this case and know that was going to be his fate, would you have changed any way that you approached him, or even gone out of your way to possibly try to pull him aside and give yourself up so that he could survive, or whatever the answer would be? Would you change anything knowing that?
I the only thing I did was look, to fill your audience in if they don't know, Sonny Black was a captain in the Bonanno crime family. And when he was my captain, he was one of the 2 guys running the family because the boss was in jail. They had killed the boss, and they had appointed a guy by the name of Russ Rastelli as boss, but he was in jail. And then there was an internal war within the Bonanno family. And the side I was with, which was Sonny Black's side, they had killed 3 capos that wanted to take over the family. And like I say, Sonny Black, even though he was a stone cold killer, he's a guy you could sit down and talk to. And we had great conversation. Like I said, I used to sleep at his apartment sometimes. When it got into it, I knew, look, that he probably was going to get killed when this thing ended because of his association with me. Because he had introduced me. He actually had introduced me as a made guy. He had sent me to Florida to talk to 2 made guys and tell them that, the situation in the family. And when he had told them I was coming down, he told them that I was a made guy. So they had to sit down with me. But when the FBI decided to close the operation, I said, look, you might want to go talk to Sonny, because I knew that he had, he was reasonable. And that was one of the ways that I could have saved him if he turned and became an informant.
Yeah.
But he didn't. I mean, he talked about a stone cold gangster. It was Sonny Black. I mean, because he knew that he was going to his demise. my whole mind, Tegan, my thinking in these operations is, look, I wasn't the cause of you becoming a gangster. You were a gangster before I got there. You were a gangster while I was associated with you, and you're probably going to stay a gangster in jail.
Yeah.
I want to see anybody get killed, but I wasn't going to go tell them while I was under. You know what I mean? That was their decision after they found out who I was, if they wanted to come over to our side. So the agents go to talk to him, and he says, "Well," he said, "if I see Donnie, then I know. I know. You know." The first thing he does, he calls his crew together to tell them. And then, of course, they have to, they got to report to the boss. They got to report that, hey, this, Donnie really an undercover agent. So to tell you the type of guy Sonny was, he gets called to a meeting. They call a sit down, which is basically a meeting. And he goes into his bar, the Motion Lounge. He gives all his money. He gives his ring. He gives his keys, except his car keys, to the bartender, and says, "Hey, I'm going to a sit down, and I'm probably not coming back."
It's
I
intense.
mean, crazy, right? Right?
Yeah.
He calls his friend, his girlfriend, and tells her the same thing. And then he says, "If I don't come back, I want you to get in touch with the FBI and pass this message on to Donnie." Right? So she can't dissuade him from going to the. He goes to the sit down. He gets to the house, and they shoot him. They kill him.
Yeah.
I mean, and he knew it. He knew he wasn't coming back. Do they have guys like that today? Probably not. Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, that is staunch. That's straight gangster, right? And everybody plans on, hey, I may be in prison or jail, but I'm going to be rich in the interim. But they really don't think about that.
No.
And most people eventually will flip. There's a lot of people that will go take a sentence if they know, hey, I'm going to go do the time.
Ruggiero did 15, and he got out because he had cancer, and he eventually passed away.
Yeah.
There was another one, another guy in the crew, Nicky Santoro. I think he did maybe 12 or 15, did his time. But I don't know how many guys would have went to that sit down knowing that I probably not going to talk my way out of this one.
Yeah, I think you just, and that, does that lift any of the burden off of you, knowing that even though and I know this is not your fault, there's got to be a sense of, it's got to be some sense of sadness when that happens, because you wrap this up and then you had all the control over this case, and then all of a sudden the AUSAs get their hands on everything, the FBI is working, and they're wrapping it up, and then these guys, you have nothing to do with the sentencing or how they cooperate or whatever. I mean, you can try to help them understand, but was that a frustrating part of the process, dealing with that? And do you ever, you ever think about him, in retrospect?
Well, like I say, I didn't want to see anybody get killed. But, my feeling was he had the shot to turn, and he didn't.
Right.
He knew what the life was, and he knew that he was in that life, and he was going to stick to that life. Now, the same thing with Ruggiero, he could have turned, but he chose to do his time, he chose to do his time. And like I say, my whole thing was, look, I didn't choose that life for them. They chose it,
Right.
They're the ones that chose that life. And they had the shot to save themselves, but they didn't.
Yeah. And I certainly didn't mean to imply that you are responsible for that.
No, I know. Yeah.
But I know also that, you can become emotionally attached to people over a year, 2 years, let alone 6. So I just, I can't imagine, was it had to be traumatic for you to some extent when that happened, was it not?
Yeah, the only one the only one I had no feelings for was Mir. That didn't bother me at all. uh, be honest with you.
Yeah, good
Uh,
riddance. That's funny. So during this time, I think the other unappreciable thing here is, and if you don't mind, I don't mean to get into sensitive areas,
Yeah.
but especially when we go back and talk about the difference between deep cover work and typical short-term undercover work by bus, et cetera, is that you had very short stints during that 6-year period where you could come home and you have a wife and 2 daughters at home during that time. Did you have both your daughters at that time too?
I had 3 at the time.
3. Okay. So how much did your daughters know about what was going on and how were they affected? First of all, or they too small?
During the operation, all they knew that I was away working. That obviously they knew I was an FBI agent.
Yeah,
they knew I was away working. My wife knew I was working undercover, but she had no idea that I was working against the mafia. Because she knew that I did a lot of undercover work. Of course, like I say, I had just come off a year that I was away on that car theft ring. It affected them more when they found out it was against the mafia. That's
Oh, okay.
When they put a contract out on me, then the kids had to move. They had to change schools, move out of the state because they weren't living in New York City or at the time. They were living across country, but they had to uproot
Hey,
from where they were. And yeah,
that's a lot. Yeah. How old were they at that time when they had to uproot?
they were in high school,
Okay.
grammar school and high school. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a tough time to move. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Especially high school, Yeah.
Yeah. Any resentment from them at the time?
There might have been, but not outwardly. Yeah. I think my kids got a little bit of me in them, as far as that. Of course, my wife, she talked to anybody,
Yeah. Well, yeah. And your wife, Maggie, and I would love to know who she was because everyone was asking me and I didn't do 6 years. So I can't imagine what an extraordinary woman she was to be able to put up with you and then put up with you being gone without being able to share any of that stuff. Can you give me a little background on her? Because I think people would be amazed to know.
We met in high school and, second year high school. Of course, she went to a different high school, but that's when we met. And she was a tough Irish lady. I mean, she was athletic, mind of her own. Never asked anybody to do anything for her. Very, very strong-minded. Very popular in high school. And a strong lady. She always worked out, but she had a strong mind. Nobody was going to tell her what to do. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And I attribute that to being Irish, that
Yeah.
she's a strong Irish lady. I mean, she raised 3 kids and none of them troublesome. I can't say, she never complained about squat. I mean, the only thing she complained about was I'd call home and the washing machine doesn't work. What do you want from me? The washing machine don't work. The lawnmower doesn't work. I mean, that's the only thing she complained. She never looked for pity. She never complained. She was just a good lady. She was a good lady.
Yeah.
And I miss her every day. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you manage the actual relationship that you had too? Because I mean, having a marriage involves a lot of work already. Yeah. So I can't imagine the time apart. I mean, it's almost like a military deployment style thing, but for that many years, you only had a few different touch points. Were there any practices that you enacted in order, like, hey, we're going to only talk about this or that or whatever, in order to just kind of keep the relationship healthy?
I would call her every day. I would call every day. Not that all the conversations were lovey-dovey, but I would call every day.
Yeah.
And like I say, that's the only thing she ever complained about was, this doesn't work or that doesn't work. And, I mean, one day she says, hey, I just went out and bought a new car, I said, what'd you buy? She says, I bought a Cadillac.
Yeah.
I said, well, if that's what you like, that's what you got, But that was her. I mean, she was just tough. Yeah. And she got along with everybody. She got she was a mother to almost every one of my kids' friends. And they could sit down and talk to her about anything. I mean, my kids' friends would come and talk to her about problems they were having.
That's amazing.
And that's the type of lady she was. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can tell she was your saving grace, but she may have been your kid's saving grace too, by just being so strong and holding it up like there isn't a lot of trauma happening, even if she's,
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. Was that I didn't have that pressure from her, because look, you worked undercover. You got here's all the people you have to, the mistresses you got undercover, right? You got your organization, you got to please them. Right? You got to please your family, and then you got to please the bad guys. So you got three mistresses that, and fortunately, she didn't put that much pressure on me as far as, things that would work on your mind,
Yeah. And she probably didn't want to overstress you either, knowing that you were doing something important.
Yeah. I mean, that's what she did. That's the way she operated. Yeah.
Did you ever go to her before you jumped into these operations? I know this first one, I know your first ones were long, but not as long as this. Did you ever have a conversation about whether or not you would do this? Because I can't imagine, back to the undercover stereotype, but I can't imagine that you could actually do deep undercover operations if you didn't have a supportive spouse.
Well, I talked about working undercover, and and she said, if that's what you're good at, and that's what you want to do, she wasn't gonna, hold me back from doing it.
Wow.
And again, if you work undercover, that's your big thing in the back of your mind is, your family, and she just kept everybody together, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anything that you missed that you regret? Obviously, you don't regret doing this, because I think this paid off in spades, obviously, and you've done a lot for society by doing this. And this was like doing something noble outside of yourself. And I'm sure your family shares in that sacrifice. But is there anything you missed family-wise that you regret?
Yeah, I do. I miss my kids growing up. I think about that a lot now. Give you an example. I had my one daughter was making her confirmation, and I had flew home for that, and it was either confirmation or communion. It was so long ago now, but at any rate, I get a call from, or I had a call in every day.
Right.
Because I told it, with these guys, they always have to know where you are. So I just told them I was going to California. So I call in and I say, hey, you got to get to Miami. We got a piece of work. Now, piece of work is they're gonna hit somebody.
Oh.
So you got to be there by tomorrow or whatever. Well, the next day was Sunday. Was my daughter's? I guess I don't remember. Yeah, it was confirmation of communion. I don't remember. So now I got to tell my wife, I got to catch a red eye.
Yeah.
And she's like, whoa,
Yeah.
I just had to tell my daughter, hey, I got to go back to work, you know. Uh, so that bothers me. Things like that, like birthdays and and holidays, because you're an orphan, so these guys want you there.
Right.
They think
You're
they're
an
being,
orphan. Yeah.
yeah, they think they're being good to you. So when I look
Yeah.
back,
Mm.
when I look back and now, and I'm like, if the operation wasn't a success, I'd be kicking myself in the rear. But it was such a success that, uh, but would I do it again? Probably not. Probably not. I wouldn't spend that time away knowing everything that I missed.
Interesting. Is part of that decision also recognizing only in retrospect how close to death you were also, and that if you did it again, you may not be so lucky? Any of that come to mind ever?
No, Tegan, it didn't. It's just the things I miss with my family.
Okay. Yeah.
That's all. That's the things that that bother me the most now. Nothing in the operation bothers me, but that bothers me is all the things I miss with the family. Yeah.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. And when you got back, I assume even though your personality was close, and I don't want to get all stereotypical and movie like here, but I also feel like there is a segment of yourself that you kind of start losing and you assimilate into this persona, even though a lot of it is your own to fit into these gangsters world. You're also changing a lot of what you would normally do. Right. So how much of that affected either your visits or moreover, once this thing came to a close after nearly 6 years, how long do you feel like it took you to get back to Joe again, where you felt like, okay, I'm completely at peace with myself and my family recognizes me as normal Joe again?
I think what bothers you is that uh, when you do come home, right, you're not really the boss anymore.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know, like you're home and somebody's going, where you going? Well, I'm going. Well, I'm home. Yeah, well, you're home, so you haven't been home for 6 months. We've got A, B, and C to do. And even my
Yeah.
wife, she's, I'm going to play tennis. But I just got home 3 hours ago. You know? Yeah, but my tennis is, I mean, stuff like that. That to me, that's what uh, took a while to get used to. Until then they accepted. Well, now he's back to being the head of the family.
Sure, sure.
Even though you're not really, but
Well, yeah.
they let you think you are.
Yeah. And part of that's just you're a good man too. So I understand conceding to your better half. I know
Yeah,
how that
exactly.
works.
Yeah.
So I respect that too. Um, do you have any regrets about the sentences and stuff after this? Because I know some of them, I mean, you had some fairly kingpin-esque guys going in for 12 and 15 years. And I know parts, we had 200 indictments they tried to make, and at least half of those went. But a lot of the bigger guys still got some smaller amounts of time versus what you would pick, maybe. Any of those
No,
seem upside down, or if they work out okay for you?
No, everybody got at least 12, 15 years. I mean, uh, I think we did pretty good. In what made me feel good, thing is that our operation was the beginning of the downfall of the mafia.
Yeah.
I mean, from our operation, we were able, in all the cases that followed, information from our operation was in every affidavit in every mob case that followed. And we were able to reduce the mafia to just another organized crime group in the United States. I mean, look, back in the day, they controlled the United States. There wasn't anything that moved in this country that they didn't get a piece of.
Yeah.
How was that? Because they controlled all the unions. They controlled all the major unions. We took that away from them. Are they involved in illegal activities today? Yeah, but they don't control the country like they once did. Like I say, they're just another organized crime group. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it was remarkable, and I didn't mean to imply it wasn't. It's still, I mean, this is why people consider you the GOAT. I mean, this was a pretty it set a precedent for everything to come right afterwards. But as sometimes guys will, since again you don't have control over what the convictions are.
Right.
I know that sometimes you'd think, well, of these guys, I wish this guy would have gotten less, but I damn sure wish this guy would have gotten more, and so on and so on. But you're fairly happy with how it all washed out.
Yeah, I had no no complaints about any convictions. In fact, there were guys that there were a couple guys that were hanger-oners. They were family. They were young guys. When I say young guys, in their late 20s, that were like petty thieves, and I never laid anything on them.
Okay. So you kind of let some people slide that were kind of connectors or whatever.
I knew the guys. They had young kids, and like I say, petty thieves. They might have took a box off a truck or something.
Yeah.
And what am I going to do? I mean, that's just me. I mean,
Yeah. But that's remarkable. That's remarkable because, again, that is you saying, look, I'm here to do a job. This is it. Everyone's picked their deal. But you were able to kind of step outside the boundaries, per se, whether you're punching somebody in the face or deciding not to put this guy in the paperwork so that he doesn't get tied up in a conspiracy that ties him into
like a couple of them, they had never been arrested before, so they had no sheet, And I'm thinking, well, maybe if they get maybe when the crew gets arrested, these guys might, because they had legitimate jobs, they were construction workers, so it wasn't like they didn't work, but they would boost off a truck or something, and it's like.
Ever kept in touch with any of those guys or any of the other guys that have got out? Never.
No.
Anybody that you would be interested in connecting with if they reached out to you? Assuming, I know you're not trying to poke the bear, but
if they reached out, my whole thing was once my case was done, it was done. I didn't want to make any arrests. I never arrested any of them. I'll see you in court. Next time I see you, I'll be on a witness stand. That's the way, that was my mindset. If they reached out to me, okay, I'd give you an example. I told you about Sonny Black, right?
Yeah.
They kill him, okay? When it's verified that he's gone, the FBI gets a call, right? And this young lady says, I need to talk to Donnie, to Donnie Brasco. So what do you have to talk to him about? Well, it's personal. All right. They pick her up and they bring her to Washington, D.C. So myself, her, and the two New York agents, we go out to dinner. And she relays the story about Sonny, right? We already had known that from informants. So it's verified. This is it. It's legit. So she says, Sonny told me on that call that if I don't come back, that I'm to get in touch with you and to relay this message to you. He doesn't have any ill feelings towards you. You were just better than they were. And he wanted me to tell you that he loved you.
Wow. That's profound.
That's heavy,
Yeah, it's very heavy.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, you're a tough guy, but I know, you've already proven even in some of the other things where you say, look, this kid boosted a couple things off a truck, but I didn't want to like ruin his life for that.
Yeah,
So
right.
I know you have a heart. That's gotta hit you,
know,
man.
he didn't have a sheet or anything. So what are you going to do?
Well, having a heart is why I was asking those questions about Sonny Black too, because I know
Yeah.
it's gotta pain you to some degree. I'm not saying it's going to stick with you to where you can't function or anything, but
Yeah.
tough guys have a heart too, and I think you've proven
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
I
I
appreciate
like,
that about you.
I mean, probably if I wasn't in law enforcement, even though, and I still knew that Sonny Black was a mob guy, right? And I was a legit guy.
Mm-hmm.
I still would go to dinner with him. I mean, that's the kind of guy he was.
It's beautiful.
Like, we didn't have to sit and talk about mob stuff. We talked about his family, talked about his kids. Of course, I had to lie about being an orphan, but the stuff from him was true.
Right.
So I always thought, even though he was a gangster, I could still be his friend, not having anything to do with illegal activities. Just maybe have lunch with him or have dinner with him or something, and just talk about whatever.
Yeah. So that would be the guy that, had he made it, you may have kept in touch with. If you had to pick one, that probably would have been the cat.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Interesting.
Or if he had turned, then I would have gone and seen him.
Right.
He was that type of guy.
Yeah.
But did he have hits under his belt? Yeah, he did. Well,
yeah, and that's why I asked about some of those kingpin guys that are, they got 15 years. That's great, but they got 6 bodies on them too that you're not getting convicted of.
Yeah,
so it's
right.
kind of a big deal.
Yeah. So,
and so now you're doing lots of training. Tell me about maybe what are your thoughts on this new generation? Because I know you mentioned that at the beginning when we first linked here, and there's some good and bad and ugly. But what do you think it's going to take for law enforcement to improve from here? Because obviously it needs improvement. What are some of the things you're seeing?
Well, I think what I see and is they don't know how to converse with people. They don't know how to carry on a conversation. Why? Because all they do is text, right?
Yeah.
All they do is text each other.
So you go undercover on the phone, you'd be in good shape, but otherwise
you'd be in great shape. I think from what I see in any classes that I lecture at, is that they can't go one-on-one with you in a conversation. And I don't know, I don't have that much. I haven't trained with the FBI for several years, so I can't comment on their undercovers. The only thing I can say is nobody's been killed yet, so they're doing something right.
Yeah, it does.
They're doing something right,
Well, and you've contributed a lot to their training, the safeguard unit in particular, which Scotty Payne mentioned to me. And I think that's pretty remarkable because he went through some struggles, and I know you know him well.
Yeah.
Tell me about what started that, because I think, when you went through, obviously you're flying by the seat of your pants, and now there's a lot of things that people can go through to prepare themselves. What are some of the other things that you've contributed?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, there was no unit or no help for undercovers. You were basically on your own. So when I came out, I went to I got assigned to Quantico in the undercover unit, and first of all was with the stagehand, and then the safeguard unit, and basically what the safeguard unit, we set up a plan for undercovers to be psychologically tested before you went undercover. Before you even went into an undercover school, we set up a school, a 2-week school, which is pretty grueling. It's a straight 2 weeks, no days off, no nights off. But prior to get into that, you had to take psychological testing, and then you had to take be interviewed, oral interview with experienced undercovers.
Mhm.
And once you got in it, if you were the undercover, you had an outlet to talk to somebody without going through normal channels. In other words, you would just call the safeguard unit and
Okay.
and talk to somebody.
Were they also the experienced undercovers, or were they
Yeah,
actual psychologists? Or
they were experienced undercovers. My partner, when the two of us were there, he was a psychologist, had a degree in psychology, was also an FBI agent.
oh, wow.
We were handling so many because we were tested. And then once you're in a program, you get tested every 6 months, psychologically tested every 6 months once you're in the program.
And what are you looking for when you say that? I mean, it's like an MMPI type of test where you
Yeah,
can't.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Then we actually started then testing the spy section, the guys and gals that were in
The CIA?
no,
Intel
intelligence
unit?
division, intelligence
Yeah.
unit of the FBI. We
Right.
started testing them. So it just got too big for the two of us. So I was able to through the current director at the time, who was Louis Free, we got the safeguard into an actual unit where they were able to bring in more people. And now we also started looking out for the families
Hmm.
of the undercovers. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and not many departments have, they don't have the resources to do it.
Right. Or the
which I think-
expertise. I mean, having somebody like you heading that off is invaluable.
So anybody that goes into I think it's a Group 1 undercover operation, you have to be certified, even if you're a police officer working for the FBI.
Okay.
They have to go.
Yeah.
They have to go through the school too.
Even the TFO, if you're a TFO.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
If they're in a Group 1 operation. Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Which is good because the training is, the 2-week school is pretty grueling. You got guys, and when I say guys, I'm talking about guys and gals.
Of course.
Some of them will drop out on their own after a couple days.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's how, because it's 24/7, and then eventually, as the 2 weeks roll on, you wash people out. And,
Purposefully, or it's just attrition?
it's just, that they don't do good. They don't do good on the scenarios and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, and they're graded on every scenario. So,
would you have appreciated that, or would that have gotten on your nerve to be made to go through that when you were starting?
Oh, I would have went through it if, but we didn't have it. So,
yeah, I was just curious if you, because I know it's, you kind of make your own path. It's
yeah. But I mean, if I was in if they had it when I was there, I would have, hey, if you want to work undercover, you got to go by the rules, So you might start with 25 in a class and maybe end up with, I don't know, 12, 13.
And then of those, how many do you think are actually going to do any significant time undercover? I don't mean do well necessarily at their jobs, but do anything significant in time wise.
Well, when I was in, some of them never did anything. They never got called on to do any undercover. But they were certified. And then, it's like anything else. The thing is that when you're successful, they beat you to, like a running mule.
Yeah, you're great at your job, and you don't say no. So why would I call anyone else, right?
Yeah, exactly. If it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah.
Some guys and gals, they work worked continuously, and some worked, here, there. But it is what it is.
So I'm kind of curious. I'm not like we're absolutely not like a current events channel or anything, but I am curious about your thoughts on the NBA gambling scandal and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions about this and call it a gambling addiction issue and all that kind of stuff. But the mob deals with gambling in a completely different way. And I was wondering if you had a take on any of that stuff that's been going on.
Well, I always told law enforcement, especially the FBI, gambling is a big money maker for the mob because everybody can be a bookmaker. When I was in, it was where they made most of their money. And it's the same thing today. It's the same thing today. I used to give talks to sports teams with Michael Francesi. You know who Michael is, right?
Yeah,
And,
of course.
And on gambling, how do you get roped into
Hmm.
getting involved with the mob? Because look, they're always looking to make money. They're always looking for weaknesses. I think that. I mean, my own opinion. I don't have any inside information, but I got to believe it's a bigger investigation than what is led on. I mean,
Yeah.
growing up in the neighborhood, everybody used to bet on the numbers. I mean, and that's just the way people are. Especially from the neighborhood. And if look, you don't think there's high stake poker games going on all over everywhere?
Yeah.
But not many of them are rigged because they're run by the mob.
Right.
And look, the mob is always looking for an advantage. They're always looking for an advantage.
Right. And I understand that a lot of it comes by, unlike going to a bookie or playing fair and square, poker, they'll front you some money so that you can gamble, knowing that down the line, if you get in trouble, you have influence that they could leverage. Does that sound accurate?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And that's the main key that's missing. I mean, there's nobody else loaning you the money to lose.
No. And look, who are they going after to play in these games? They're not going after the guy that lives in the shack down the street.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I don't think any more needs to be said. They're going after people that once they lose their money, they'll be in a position to help them. And that's the way the mob operates.
Yeah,
that's the way they operate.
Did you ever have any experience? This is like really out of left field, but did you ever have any experience since you were working the New York mob over in the Pocono resorts or anything? Because all those cats seem to vacation out there all the time, or Atlantic City even.
Yeah, no, my guys kind of stayed in New York area, Little Italy, Brooklyn. The guys I hung around with, we went to Miami a lot.
Florida,
They had they had contacts in a couple of hotels that we were able to go in on the arm, stay on the arm at these hotels.
Yeah.
Because they knew either the managers or whoever. No, we never went to Atlantic City. Most of it was we'd go to Miami. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Miami,
that still
Florida.
makes sense too. Yeah, I mean, obviously tons of them went down there too. And I know, the guy that connected us, I think initially, Jimmy Ciano was stayed out there.
Yeah. I worked with Jimmy in Dallas. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. I know he did a lot of his stuff in Florida too, but not necessarily not mob stuff necessarily. But I guess lastly, is there anything? I mean, you're a young guy. What you up to now? Do you have any new goals, new books, new projects, anything coming out that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm in the process of writing a book on the Bonanno family. Doing that now. And I got a project about a a gentleman that I know that grew up with Tourette's syndrome. You know what Tourette's is?
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, Leo Rossi, wrote the script. So we're finishing up with the script and hopefully get that into some type of production. But other than the book that I'm doing on the Bananos, not much in the movie industry right now, except that the script on.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a novel. What kind of story is that?
It's personal about his life growing up and dealing with it, and people not really knowing why the outburst into his adulthood and how he became a successful businessman and controlled it. It's a feel good story.
Yeah, success story.
Yeah. It's just a very successful businessman.
Great.
If anybody wants to buy Donnie Brasco merch, go to the Real Donnie Brasco. There's some merch on there.
Yes, sir. I will definitely push that. And if you have any projects, I'm just letting you know, it'd be an honor for me to help you push anything you have.
Okay.
So if you have a new project, just shoot me an email or text or whatever you want to do, or have a conversation. It's either I'm all good. I don't have to just text. Good. I'm old too. So,
Right. Yeah. I like to talk too, but yeah.
You leveraging any of your old contacts? I mean, you've had a successful movie out about your life, obviously, that most people know about.
Yeah.
Or do you still keep in contact with those guys, or is that who you're leveraging in order to push this new project forward?
With this one, no.
Okay.
I still keep in contact with Johnny Depp. I'm very close to him.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in January, the end of January, he came and spent 2 days with us in New Jersey. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. He actually came to see my wife. She wasn't doing too good. She was on a sick bed.
Yeah.
So he came and spent 2 days with us. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful, and that's that's got to be a genuine relationship. He obviously had to get to know you, and knowing you, and then understanding how powerful and obviously tolerant your wife was too. I can see why he would want to spend some time with her and support.
Yeah, he always stayed we've always stayed in touch through all these years. He's always inquired about her. Unfortunately, she spent 22 years fighting cancer. And he always wanted to know what he could. I mean, I love that guy. He always wanted to know what he could do. Anything he can do, don't hesitate. And then in January, he came and spent 2 days with her, and then she passed away in March. So, yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. And I'm sorry for your loss too. I know the first time we spoke, I think, was probably a year ago.
Yeah.
And so I know she was starting to have issues. Yeah.
Yeah, she was going downhill, so that's why we couldn't get on. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, thank you.
I'm grateful you got to spend the time that you did with her, and I'm sure she was grateful for you, because you seem like a really cool guy, and it's good to know people like you who have such a great success story that they could be an asshole if they wanted to, but you're a sweet guy, and I really appreciate you burning time and putting up with my inept technical abilities and all that kind of stuff.
Hey, look, I'm the least technical guy there is. I mean, I can turn the computer on and I can get Netflix and Amazon and read my emails. That's about it.
Well, me too. I'm grateful for your time, and I'll probably connect with you on the side too. I got a couple things I'd like to send out to you. So
okay, good.
Thank you so much, my brother. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. All right, be careful.
What's it take? What you gonna do? What you gonna do? Success around the sandbox with second grade rules. A confident fake to make you do what they want when they won't. Pay the fool. A diplomatic face is the one to see you through. And don't let those bigots take you off your game, but just to let them loose. You sit here in the front